If you'll turn with me to the book of Esther, chapter 3, that's where we're at today. We've been on this series going through the book of Esther and looking at what God says to us about living in such a time as this and all that he has to say. And so we've been going through it the last couple weeks, and so we continue in that series today, coming to chapter 3. And as I thought about Father's Day, and I thought about what chapter 3 has to say, then I thought about what kind of fun illustration could we use that represents kind of the day. I thought about what is a piece of technology that's been around for a little while that has probably caused many households to get upset with each other, right? The question of who gets to hold the remote control, right? And you guys all got a paper remote control on your way in. I'm sorry to inform you that does not turn me off. That does not mute me. If you don't like my sermon, you can't change the channel with it. But we have these opportunities. But the remote control is that item in the family that kind of represents some power, doesn't it? That whoever has the right to hold the remote control gets to turn the TV and watch whatever they want to watch. And if you're in the room, you just have to put up with it because they have the remote, right? I remember when I was younger, I think my brothers used to hide the remote at night, so that way if I got up in the morning before them, I couldn't find the remote, so they could find it and turn on what they wanted. I'm sure that happened in many households, not just mine. But we have this idea that whoever has the remote, you can watch the game, you can watch the movies, you can listen to people and their advice, but you don't have to follow it. If they think it's too loud, too bad. If they think it's too low, then sorry, but I have the remote, so no. You get to control the issues. You get to decide what is on there. You get to decide how to change the channels and when to do that. And you get to say to them, nope, this is what we're watching now. This little remote, it reveals a lot about us, though. It reveals a lot about who we are and what we seek, because we want the remote so we can have the power to do things, the power to control over people. How sad were some of you when you realized you went to the store and bought a universal remote and it didn't control the universe, right? That's what you were hoping for. But we want to control things around us. That's just kind of who we are. We want to control the room. We want to control conversations. We want to control the outcome of things, the response of other things. We want to control our schedule. We want to control people around us and the way things are done. It's just kind of part of who we are. It's built into us mostly from the sinful nature that says, I am in charge and I can do what I want. And if you don't follow that, then that's on you. The problem is that when we control things, often what rises up inside of us is things that aren't of God. We find rising up inside of us anger. We find defensiveness. Sometimes we find silence. We find sarcasm. Sometimes we find the reason that we need to have the last word no matter what. And so on Father's Day, this is worth looking at as we look at Esther chapter 3 and remember the fact that this is Father's Day, but this isn't a sermon just for fathers or just for men. Because fathers have influence, parents have influence, leaders have influence, teachers have influence, adults around other people and other kids, especially around kids, have influence. And so we all have some kind of power in our lives. And so then God calls us and says, when you have the remote, what are you doing with that power in your life? And so the question is, when you have that remote, what will you do with it? And in Esther chapter 3, we are introduced to a man named Haman. Haman is given a lot of power. He has position, he has status, he has influence, he has access to the king. In many ways, Haman has the remote for the kingdom, and they all have to listen to him. Now, Haman, as he gets control and gets power, that he decides he needs a level of respect given to the fact that he has the remote. You need to respect me. You need to watch what I want to watch and do what I want to do. And there's a man named Mordecai who we met last week in our sermon. And Mordecai decides that he is not going to honor Haman in the way that Haman is desiring. And suddenly, all of Haman's power feels like it's useless. All of the power Haman feels that he has, the authority that he's been given, the status he's been given, the power, all the influence that he has, all of a sudden feels like it's worthless to him because one person will not listen to him. And so today we're going to walk through Esther chapter 3 together. I'm going to read short passages of it and kind of talk through it a little bit with you as we look at this idea and we look at this question, who do we become when we do not get our way? And we're reminded of this thought. The power God gives us is not something to prove, it is something to surrender. And so, Esther chapter 3, the first 2 verses, we're going to find that selfish power pushes the button of recognition. And so, Esther chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. Sometime later, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, Hammedatha, the Agagite's son, by promoting him above all the officials who worked with him. All the royal workers at the king's gate would kneel and bow face down to Haman because the king had ordered so. But Mordecai didn't kneel or bow down. Now, first thing we need to see is we see this man named Haman, and we see that he is an Agagite, and an Agagite connects him to a type of people that were around. And I forgot who it was. The Amalekites, that's who it was. The Amalekites. And if you know a little bit of history, if you've read a little more in the Old Testament, the Amalekites were a people who were around the Promised Land. And when the Israelites were going to the Promised Land, they were given the land and they were told to wipe out all the people in that land. That was the Amalekites. And they did not do it. They wiped out a majority of them, but they left some of them around and some of their goods and treasures and stuff. And so then that becomes a thorn in the side of the Jewish people. And of course, the Amalekites, they pass on from generation to generation. These guys tried to wipe us out. And so there's a hatred that had built up. We see in the time of King Saul, then we fast forward to King Saul, and Saul is commanded to wipe them out, and he doesn't do it. And he loses then favor with God for that and many other reasons. And that's when David starts to take over and become king and those kind of things. And so this may not be just an offense of Haman, the Amalekite, versus Mordecai, the Jewish person. This may be something that goes a little bit deeper. But whatever reason that is, Haman is walking around, I hold the remote, I have the power, you need to bow down to me. And Mordecai says, nope, not going to do it. And he loses his mind about that. And we'll get to that part in a moment. But Haman is promoted by the king, and everyone is commanded to bow down. Haman has the remote, he has the position, he has the power, he has the access, he has the authority. And he doesn't simply just want obedience. He doesn't want just, hey, sorry, you're stuck watching the baseball game today, guys. I'm turning it on. You're stuck with that. He wants you to not only acknowledge that you have to watch the baseball game that I choose, but then you have to root for the baseball game too. And some of you would rather root for paint to dry than you would for baseball. I get it, but I don't. But he's commanding that even happens. And so Mordecai is there and he has a choice to make. Haman wants to validate his identity by having them bow down to him. Haman has all the influence, but his selfishness and that power rides inside of him and gives him an opportunity to make people bow down to him because he wants his ego stroked. He wants his preferences made. He wants the expectations there. He wants them to bow because he just feels they need to because he has all the power. Haman's problem was not that he had the power in the first place. Never does it say that it's wrong that he had the power and authority. That some of you are blessed with leadership skills and other skills, that you are in a position of power and authority in jobs and other places, that God has blessed you with those skills, and when you use those in a godly way, that's not a problem. But Haman is not using it in a godly way. He's using it in a way to make himself look better and to take all that away from God. We see it all around us. We see some people who need to be loved, some people who need to be feared, some people who lead by silence or they lead by guilt, and they try to strike in with anger and withdrawal and other issues, and they try to use all those to manipulate people to follow them and give in to their power to help them. And so I wonder this morning, when you have a hold of the remote, do the people closest to you experience your influence as protection or as pressure? A godly person does not need everyone in the house to bow down to them. A godly person takes the remote and says, all right, it's not loud enough. Okay, let me turn it up for you. Oh, it's too loud. Let me turn it a little bit down. I pressed the button once there, right? Says, what do you guys want to watch together? And looks out for those around him. A person who is following God's ways and has that power in them is not looking for selfish gain, but they're using their influence to help serve and protect and guide and bless others around them as well. And so here's the question for point number 1. Who do you become when you do not get the recognition you think you deserve? Are you looking out for yourself? Or are you looking out for others around you? The second thing that we see in this passage today is that we see selfish power pushes the button of offense. Look at verses 3 through 6 with me. So the royal workers at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why don't you obey the king's order?" Day after day they questioned him, but he paid no attention to them. So they let Haman know about it just to see whether or not Mordecai's words would hold true. He had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman himself saw that Mordecai didn't kneel or bow down to him, he became very angry. But he decided not to kill only Mordecai, for people had told him Mordecai's race. Instead, he planned to wipe out all the Jews, Mordecai's people, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. The text does not tell us every reason why Mordecai refuses to bow down. But again, it could be many reasons, from his faith in God and not bowing down, like we see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego not bow down in their time. So I'm not bowing down to others because I only bow to God. It could be because of that clash that I mentioned a little bit ago. It could be for many different things. But what we do know is that he takes a stand and says, this is not something I need to do and not something I should do. And Haman has the whole kingdom's applause. He has everything around him, and people are just dying to be around him and hear from him and listen to him, to see what he chooses to do with his remote, and they just love it and approve of everything he does because they want to have a little bit of that power themselves. It's interesting, I think, when I read these verses, it's interesting that Haman didn't notice Mordecai until it was pointed out to him. That it wasn't until Mordecai was pointed out and Haman started to look for him that he noticed he wasn't bowing. And then what happens? Because he didn't bow, Haman becomes obsessed over Mordecai and what needs to happen. He has 99 other people bowing before him and singing his praises and watching whatever he wants on TV. And he has one person who disagrees and one person who doesn't follow the rules. And he fixates on that one person. When we have power, and it's a selfish power, we fixate on the things that aren't being followed the ways that we want them to be followed. The people who aren't looking, and it becomes more about making them comply than it does about the many other people who are complying with that. And so this is what happens when we have the remote. When control becomes our identity, that every disagreement feels like it's disrespect to us, that we take offense by things that aren't done around us and not done the right way and not done the way we want it to be, that every no feels like it's a rebellion against me personally, that every challenge feels like an attack on me and the way that I do things. And so one of the tests of being a godly leader is how do we respond when people don't immediately react the way that we want them to react. Children will resist us. Spouses will disagree. People will disappoint you. Plans, they get changed. How do you respond? Be honest with yourself. What happens inside of you when you feel like you're being ignored? What rises up inside of you when you feel disrespected? Do you punish people emotionally when you do not get the way that you want, the ways that you want things? I know for me, it is often when I feel ignored or disrespected or unappreciated that offense starts to rise inside of me, that I start to feel like everyone's against me and nothing's going right. And I feel like things that are unintended to be then become daggers at me in my life. And so I have to watch myself, and I have to ask these questions, because Haman's not showing us the right way to hold the remote control, but God shows us and teaches us. And so the question here is, who do you become when you feel ignored, corrected, or disrespected? Who do you become at those points? Do you become more like Haman, or do you become more like Jesus? And we'll get to Jesus in a few moments. But the third thing that we see today is that selfish power pushes the button of escalation. Look again at verse 6, and I'll read verse 7 as well. But he decided not to kill only Mordecai, for people had told him Mordecai's race. Instead, he planned to wipe out all of the Jews, Mordecai's people, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of the rule of King Ahasuerus, servants threw Pur, namely dice, in front of Haman to find the best day for his plan. They tried every day and every month, and the dice chose the 13th day of the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. And so selfish power brings escalation. Haman's response is wildly disproportionate for what's happening, that he is really out of control. Mordecai refuses to bow, and Haman decides that Mordecai alone is not to be punished. But because Mordecai represents the Jewish people, which he may not be there representing Jewish people, he's there working, but because he is a Jewish person, then I am going to get rid of all of the Jews. That I am going to take care of all of them, his entire race, not just him, because of the disrespect he's showing me. This is how dangerous unchecked pride can become in all of us. That we end up having wounded pride, and rarely does it stay contained if we do not get it under control. If we do not admit it and we do not work on it and fix it, that wounded pride then gets disproportionate, out of place, and we end up doing a lot of things that we don't intend to do. We've already seen that in the book of Esther, right? Those of you who were with us in chapter 1, we saw the king have a great party, and he had a huge party for like 6 months, and then he had another week-long party, and as they were drinking he was showing off his riches and everything, he called for the queen to come in, and the queen said no. And despite the fact that he had hundreds of people in front of him, and he was showing off his wealth and his power, the queen said no, and he lost his mind. It threw him off and ended the party, and not only that, but he kicked the queen out. And that's how we get to Esther. We talked about that at the beginning of chapter 2. But here we have the same mentality, the same problem with Haman, that he just loses his mind over this. Haman does not just want to change the channel. He does not want just for Mordecai to watch what he wants to watch, but he wants to smash the whole television, break it up, and throw it out of the house so no one can ever do it again, so no one can ever watch what he can argue with him with what he wants to watch. He takes personal offense and he turns it into a public crisis for all. His insecurity becomes policy. His anger becomes violence. His ego then becomes law around them. When selfish power is wounded, it often escalates. A small disagreement becomes a major fight. A correction becomes a character attack. A disappointment creates distance among us. A challenge becomes punishment. A bruised ego becomes a broken relationship. Our homes, our workplaces, our friendships, our church life are all deeply shaped by what happens when we get offended by things. And so the question is, where have you taken something personally and then made others pay for it? Where has it come out in your life? The fourth thing that we see today in this chapter of Esther is we see that selfish power pushes the button of manipulation as well. Look at verses 8 through 11 with me. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "A certain group of people exist in pockets among the other peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of everyone else, and they refuse to obey the king's laws. There's no good reason for the king to put up with them any longer. If the king wishes, let a written order be sent out to destroy them, and I will hand over 10,000 kikars of silver to those in charge of the king's business. The silver can go into the king's treasuries." The king removed his royal ring from his finger and handed it to Haman, Hammedatha, the Agagite's son, enemy of the Jews. The king said to Haman, "Both the money and the people are under your power. Do as you like with them." So not only does the king say, you can have control of the remote control for now, but he hands them all the remote controls. You get it all. Whatever you want, whatever you say, that is what will go. And so selfish power pushes the button of manipulation. Haman does not tell the king the whole truth here. He does not tell him about Mordecai not bowing to him. He frames the Jewish people as dangerous, as different, and as disobedience. He uses partial truths and he uses fear to secure power with the king. Haman does not only want to control the outcome, he wants to control the whole story and where it will go from here. Selfish power often frames the situations that we're in, and it makes it look like our ways are right and everyone else's ways are wrong. It rarely says, "My pride is wounded." Instead, it says, "I'm just standing up for what is right. They are the problem. I had no choice." Sometimes we try to take back the remote control emotionally with our pride is hurt, but it leads to more excuses. I'm the only one who cares around here. After all I do, this is how you treat me? I guess I just won't say anything anymore. Manipulation starts to happen and starts to take place instead of healing. Selfish power controls the story so it can control the outcome. But godly power tells the truth, even when the truth humbles us a bit, even when the truth hurts a little bit. So here's the question. Who do you become when telling the truth would make you look smaller? Who do you become when telling the truth would make you look smaller? Are you being disproportionate? Are you exaggerating? Are you not telling the whole truth? Are you being like Haman so that you look better and those around you look smaller? Or are you being humble and admitting where you've been short and confessing that and humbling yourself so that you don't look as big on your pedestal? We have to be honest with God. We have to talk to Him about what we do with our power. With the things that we try to control, how are we trying to live? How are we trying to act? Because ultimately, the power that we're given is meant to be surrendered. And that's point number 5 today. Surrendered power lets Jesus hold the remote. Esther chapter 3 shows us power corrupted by pride. It's all about Haman and all about what he wants and him getting his way. But when we read about Jesus, we read about power that is surrendered in love for the good of others. Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 11, adopt the attitude that was in Christ Jesus. Though he was in the form of God, he did not consider being equal with God something to exploit. But he emptied himself by taking the form of a slave and by becoming like human beings when he found himself in the form of a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Therefore, God highly honored him and gave him a name above all names, that the name of Jesus, everyone in the heaven, on earth, and under the earth might bow, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. We find the description of what it means to be humble and loving and be a servant. And I love how the Apostle Paul ends that passage. It doesn't say, under the earth, so that they might bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of Jesus, but to the glory of the Father. Jesus did not use his authority to demand his own way. He did not exploit his power. He humbled himself. He took the form of a servant, and he became obedient to death, even death on the cross for each and every one of us. Haman had borrowed power, and he used it to destroy others. Jesus had ultimate power, and he used it to save all of us. Jesus is the only one who is truly worthy to have all that power, truly worthy to hold the remote and tell us how to live and show us what we need to see and guide us through this life. He's the only one who ultimately has the power to do that. But he gives us a shot, and he listens to us, and he loves us, and he forgives us. And he says, hey, what show do you want to watch right now? Let's go ahead and turn it together. Oh, it's too loud. Let me turn it down for you. Let's find a movie. Let's find a game together. Let's enjoy time together in this room, living this life. Jesus laid his life down for the very people who are trying to take control from him. That others were trying to control him, and they were the ones that put him to death on the cross. Our model is Christ with a towel in his hand, a cross on his back, and love in his heart. And so when we have that power build up inside of us, and it starts to lean towards that selfish side, we're reminded of the servant, the one who loved us, the one who gave his power up for us. Esther 3 shows us something uncomfortable. Haman had power, but he did not have peace in his life. He could influence a king, but he could not govern his own emotions, his own anger. He could command others, but he could not command himself. He held power in his hand, but his heart was ruled by pride. And this is the warning for us this morning. It's not a matter of if we have influence. After all, fathers have influence, mothers have influence, neighbors have influence, teachers have influence, bosses have influence, friends have influence. We all have influence in some way, but it's a matter of what do we do with that influence, with that power. The issue is what power does to us when we receive it. Does it make us more humble, or does it make us more demanding? Does it make us more patient, or does it make us easily offended by things around us? Does it make us more like Jesus or more like Haman? Selfish power always has to prove itself. It has to win every argument. It has to control the room. It has to have the last word. It has to make sure that everyone knows who is in charge, who is holding the remote. But Jesus shows us a better way. Jesus had the authority. He used it to serve. He had all power, and he used it to lay down his life. He did not grasp for control and cling to it. He did not have to prove that he was worthy of it. He simply trusted his heavenly Father to take care of him and to provide for him. And so he handed over the control to his Father. That through his life, death, and resurrection, Jesus doesn't just forgive us for the ways that we have mishandled using the remote ourselves, but he gives us a new way to use that remote when it's given to us. A new way for us to be able to get rid of the pride and get rid of the control and get rid of the anger. That he is providing for us a way that through him we can have that grace in our lives. And so as we enter into our reflection time this morning, maybe the question is not, do I have influence? Because we all do. But maybe the question is, what am I doing with my influence? What remote am I clinging to? What remote am I holding on to? And that's where you can get your piece of paper out and you all have your remote. And so maybe this morning, just with that symbolism in front of you of a remote, of that control and that power that we think about, maybe you need to ask yourself again, what remote am I holding? Do I need to hand over to Jesus? Do I need to submit to him? Is it the remote of having to have respect? Is it the remote of always being right? Is it the remote of anger? Is it the remote of always having the best image? Is it the remote of needing everyone to respond to what I want and do the things I want to do? Is it the remote of something else that you're clinging to so that you have the control and you have the power? And Jesus is asking you to just get rid of it, to lay it down before him. Give him your remote so that he can show you the proper way to use the remote, to have that influence, that power in your life around you. Jesus does not invite us to just surrender it. He invites us to give it all to him freely. He doesn't want to shame you about it. He doesn't look down on you for it. He doesn't make fun of you for it. He simply wants you to surrender it to him so that he can love you and forgive you and show you how you can live without that remote in your hand, how you can live without having that power and that control, and you can reveal the love of Christ in your own life and to others around us. And so the statement I started the sermon with, I end with, the power God gives us is not something to prove, it is something to surrender. And so as we sing this closing song together, is God speaking to you about a remote that you have that you need to hand over to him? And so maybe you need to spend some time singing the song, and that's your prayer today as you leave here. Maybe it's something that God's speaking to you about already. Maybe it's something you're ready just to hand over to him. And that takes you taking a step forward. It takes you being willing to come and lay your remote before God. We have these altars up here. You can come forward and you can put your remote down on there and you can say a prayer just asking God to help you as you deal with whatever that remote represents for you. Forgiveness, healing, broken relationships, dealing with anger, pride, whatever that looks like for you. And as a way, you just come forward and say a prayer asking God to help you as you deal with that, help you to release that remote, and then you can leave that remote here at the altar, realizing now, symbolizing now that you've given that over to God. Feel free to respond in whatever way. If you need to sit and pray where you're at, if you're not able to come forward, that's fine. Just have that discussion with God and be honest with him this morning. What remote am I holding on to that I need to hand over to him? Please stand, and as we sing, feel free to respond in whatever way you feel you need to.